There is a story in the Old Testament that, if I'm honest with you, I would consider the most disturbing thing in the entire Bible. It can also be considered as not suitable for minors, so before you watch this video, I want to make sure you know this. Video is not suitable for all ages, and the past story I am referring to is found in chapters 19 through 21 of the book of Judges. Many people are familiar with chapter 19 but didn't read the rest. Story, I believe, has some important lessons you and I need. Learn from such a disturbing thing. The first story I will tell you is like this, as impressively as possible, and then we will explore the lessons that I believe you can study with me in Judges chapter 19. In chapter 19 verse 1, in chapter 19 verse 1, in the days when there was in a remote part of the hill country, Ephraim got a woman from Bethlehem, Judah's as his own. My concubine wants you to understand that this is a Levite who lives in the northern part of Israel, and this woman will be his concubine or wife. Whatever you want to call it, she is it. Lives south in Bethlehem. Let us continue the story. She was unfaithful him and left him at her father's house in Bethlehem of Judah, where she stayed. In 4 months she betrayed him and went back to her father's house, Bethlehem. So the story continues. Basically, this Levite wanted to get his wife came back, so he left north of the hill country of Ephraim to south in Bethlehem to find this woman and to be with her again. He gets there, and her father was very hospitable. Many times the man told me to go. Give me my wife so I can go home, and father said, no, stay another night. He said, okay, I will stay one more night, and this repeats for many days. Until finally the man said, with all respect, I appreciate your hospitality, but I need to leave. I need to go home. So he finally left to go home, and that's where all the tragedy happens. While the man was with his concubine, travel in southern Israel from Bethlehem faces north to their Ephraim, near Jebus, and the day is near. The servant said to his master, please stop in this city, Jebus, and overnight here. But his owner replied, we will not stop in a strange city where there is no Israeli. Let us continue. Gibeah. Then the servant suggested we go. Try to go to one of these places and overnight in Gibeah or Ramah for them. Continue the journey in the sunsets. As they approached Gibeah and Benjamin, they got there and was surprised that no one was there, ready to take them in. Hotel accommodation is aspects of Israeli culture. At the end of the night, an old man appeared in square and asked why you were still there. Is there no one here to welcome you? Go to their house, they answered. No. One of the people who took us in said, the old man, you can stay with me. The Levites responded, wonderfully tonight. To let you know, we don't need anything from you. We have enough food for us. Fool, for me and for my concubine, we just need a place to rest your mind. If you give me a pillow, that's all I need. The old man said, no problem, you can stay with me. So the Levite was his servant, and his concubine spent the night here, the man's house in Gibeah. Then this happened while they were suddenly enjoy the evil men of the city surrounding the house and knock on the door. They said to the old man, landlord brought out the man who came to your house so we could have sex with him. Was amazing. Here is the story. There was a time when there were depraved men live in Gibeah. Benjamites, people go here, old man's house, and said, we know you have a guest in your house, take him out. We can all have sex with. Now let's see what happens next. The landlord came out and said, please do not commit this crime, my brother. After all, this man came under me. The roof does not commit this vile crime. Here, let me bring out my virgin daughter. And the man's concubine abused them, and do whatever you want with them, but do not commit this nonsense against this man. We will deal with this a little later in this video. But what happens next is sentence 25 says, it is unimaginable, but the man will not heard. Then he took his concubine and take her out for them to rape, and abused her all night until morning. Dawn, they let her go. Now, my friend, that's why I say this video might be considered unsuitable for minors and can trigger some things from your past. Because imagine there is a group here, the perverts, and they are taking turns back to sex with this woman. They raping her all night long. Until morning, they finally let go. She goes, and this is what happens with this young woman, a tragedy. Start in the morning, woman return. And when dawn broke, she collapsed at the door of the house where her God dwells. Can imagine the fatigue of being beaten, and she was abused all night by the men she barely had the strength to crawl back to the man house and just collapsed on the porch and lie there. Now watch what happens. Next it says here that when her Lord had received, wake up in the morning, he opens the door house and go out to continue his journey with his woman. The concubine collapsed near the door. The house, with her hands on the threshold, stood up. He told her to go, but there, no reaction. The woman was like that. Was abused that she died. Note that it. Donkey and go to his house. What happened next was sad and horrifying. But it says, like after he walks in his house, he has a knife. The concubine cut her into 12 pieces with her hands and feet, and then send her around the territory of Israel, all who see. This says nothing like this happened or has been seen since the Israelites came out of Egypt. For now, think about it, discuss, and said this man brought his concubine to his house, cut her into 12 pieces and make sure attach a letter to each of his pieces. Concubine died and sent another part of her body for 12 tribes. Israel with a letter detailing exactly what was done by his own brothers. One of the 12 tribes of Israel, of Benjamin, and when other tribes saw and read what happened to this women, they say nothing like this has happened throughout our history now. There is more to the story. Chapter 20 and 21, so I want you to wait, but here is where I want to start looking at some lessons we can learn from this first. The lesson here is when there is none responsibility in our lives, we tend to strongly deflected. Look at Judges 19:1, which we read before, but I will read it again. In those days when there was no king in Israel, you and me, when we are not, take responsibility without fear. Have to explain myself either. Be responsible for our decisions, and actions tend to easily cause bad things. Decisions because we think we can make them. These decisions in isolation without must answer to anyone else, and that is exactly what is happening in Israel. There is no king, but there is law. People do not respect the law, is not executed, and as a result, they finally did something. Probably never imagined they would address is that we need to make sure that we treat every human being as a carrier. Image of, my God, this is the man who is saying it will happen. Wrong when they want to do whatever they want with this man, but they can do what they do. Want with my daughter and with him. His concubine's thoughts are life. And this man's virtue was more than that. More valuable than his daughter and this man's concubine we need to do. Sure, and that's why seeing doesn't fit. Beautiful scenery and things like that. We must make sure not to do that. If you want to stop watching that stuff online, you know, you shouldn't watch. And you know what I mean? I want you to see every girl you are looking at is like a pregnant person. Of the image of God as a person, your daughter, imagine if you want someone looking at your daughter doing the things you are seeing on the screen. But here's the third thing I want to highlight in this video. The more you and I stray from God, the more vulnerable we become to doing things we never imagined we would do. You see, when you look at the book of Judges as a whole, what you will see is a nation of people who have slowly drifted away from God. They have slowly deviated. And what you see happening in chapters 19 to 21 is the culmination of drifting away from God, and shows how far the nation as a whole drifted away from God. And my friend, you and I are no different, because if we do not maintain a close connection with God, if we stray from God, if we deviate from God, that is when we, like the Israelites, will find ourselves doing things that someone 10 years ago would have tried to tell us we would do, and we would have been convinced that there was no way we would do those things. There's no way I'll get a divorce. There's no way I'll have an affair. There's no way I'll be fired from my job because they found me watching something. online, there's no way I'll be smoking marijuana or whatever. The further you stray from God, the more vulnerable you become to committing that sin. Now, the story doesn't end in chapter 19. I wish it did. But in fact, it gets worse, because what happens now in chapter 20 is a civil war among the 11 tribes of Israel, and they are fighting against the tribe of Benjamin, because it was the tribe of Benjamin that committed that atrocious act of sin against one of their own Israeli brothers. So I encourage you to read in detail chapters 20 and 21. But to summarize, there is a huge battle. Thousands and thousands of lives were lost as a result of that battle from both sides. And what ends up happening is that only 600 Benjamite men remain. Then in chapter 21, the other 11 tribes begin to feel bad or pity for the tribe of Benjamin, because they are essentially worried that this tribe of Benjamin is going to become extinct, since there are only 600 men left alive, but no Benjamite women for them to marry and reproduce. Now they have another problem, because now they are worried that one of their 12 tribes of Israel is going to become extinct. This leads to my fourth lesson. Every bad decision we make has consequences that we cannot choose. Although what these Benjamites did was, Psi 11 other tribes are coming and actually fighting and killing them, was a decision they made, and now they have to deal with the outcome of that decision. And the Benjamites also have to pay for the outcome of their bad decision. Listen, you can choose your sin, but you can't choose your consequences. Every decision you make has consequences. And the problem is, personally, you and I cannot choose those consequences. So what happens is that the Israelites go and kill men from this clan called Gibeah, and there are 400 women who have never been with a man. Then they take these 400 women and give them to 400 of the 600 Benjamite men, so these men can reproduce. But what's the problem? Simple math. There were 600 Benjamite men who couldn't find wives, because all the wives had been killed, and 400 of them now have a wife given to them from the clan of Gibeah. So the problem is that there are now 200 men from Benjamin who do not have wives, and that's why I said that a bad decision resulted. Another thing that happened next was these Israelis basically say, you know what? We all swore we couldn't give our daughters to any of the Benjamites, but it says nothing about if they are taken. So what happens is that they have to make another bad decision and say, you know what, this is what the Benjamites need to do. Send a message and say, look, there's a festival coming up, a feast, and basically some of our daughters are going to be dancing and having fun at this feast. Technically, we cannot give our daughters to you because we made a vow, but if you find them and kidnap them, that's on you. If you find them and kidnap them, we'll be free from that vow, because technically we didn't give our have a wife and reproduce. So they have this feast, and essentially these 200 Benjamite men go and steal and kidnap these women while they are dancing at a party and take them back as their wives. Personally, I know this is a crazy story, and I tried to summarize it as quickly as I could, but the point is this: one bad decision often leads to another, and all kinds of bad decisions affect other people. Go through this story again and see how many people were negatively affected by one bad decision. Some of the Benjamite men deserved what happened to them, but most of the people in Benjamin had nothing to do with it and died in battle. The people of Gibeah died. 2 of the women were then taken from their land and given to these Benjamites, and then these other women were kidnapped by their families. All this happened because of bad decisions. But here is the 5th and last lesson I want to encourage you with today. God has grace for us even in the midst of our most destructive decisions. Notice how the book of Judges ends. It says here that the Benjamites did this and took the number of women they needed from the dancers they captured. They returned to their own inheritance, rebuilt their cities, and lived in them. At that time, each of the Israelites returned from there to his own tribe and family. Each returned from there to his own inheritance. And of course, the last verse of the book of Judges characterizes and describes the entire book of Judges it. No king in Israel, as everyone did what was right in his own eyes, my friend. Although God was merciful in allowing this tribe of Benjamin to rebuild and to not go extinct, there were consequences for their decisions. And if there's nothing else you take from this video, I want to encourage you to understand that every decision you and I make has consequences. Often they can't even be measurements and consequences that we cannot choose. See you in the next video. Bye. God bless you.